Hey, welcome back to the show. Excited about our next guest because I've known Chris Doering for a long time. In fact, admired him when he played at the University of Florida, number 28. And he's in Huntsville, Alabama, my home state, and he's speaking to the quarterback club tonight. Chris, first off, great to see you. And you have become quite the guy in the circuit talking about the Southeastern Conference. Are you enjoying this? Because you're a busy guy.
I am, and you said you've known me for a long time. You were my first play-by-play guy, and you know that. And I just want to make sure everybody else knows that was part of my journey here. You've been such a great help and mentor to me as I've continued on in my broadcasting career, and just think so fondly of those days of getting to work with you back in the CSS early years there. So, my alignment with the SEC is awesome. I love what I do at the SEC Network. I love what I do with SiriusXM on the SEC channel, and just no conference that I'd rather have the opportunity to cover than this one, the one that I grew up a fan of, the one that I played in, and the one that now I get to cover. So it's a special thing, man. I'm excited about a season here in the SEC that, honestly, Doug, I feel like it's the most anticipated year we've had in this conference as long as I've been doing this. And some of it probably has to do with Texas and Oklahoma coming in. Some of it has to do with the playoff expanding and more teams getting a chance to play more meaningful games at the end of the year and potentially try to win a national championship. But I just also feel like there's a lot of desire to get back to football. And it's been a very negative offseason with a lot of serious heavy topics that we've been covering, including the congressional settlement. I think we're ready to get out there and play some football now.
Yeah, I'm excited. I really am. And listen, let me ask you this before we get into that, because you were part of the Steve Spurrier era, the 10 years that really, in my mind, with all due respect to the great history of the conference, which you're a big part of now, and Coach Bryant in Alabama. And listen, I live here. I know what he brought to the table. But what Coach Spurrier brought to the table, you and Danny Werfel and those great teams, and it collided with CBS and the 3:30 Eastern time game. And for 10 years, you guys played, every week it was Florida against Georgia, Florida against Tennessee, Florida against LSU, Florida against Alabama in the SEC championship game. What Spurrier and Florida how they elevated this conference, Chris, is amazing. Does Coach get enough credit for that?
No, I don't think he gets enough credit for what he did here in this league, and I don't think he gets enough credit for what football in general looks like these days. Coach Spurrier comes to the SEC basically 3 yards in a cloud of dust, run the football, power, all about who's the tougher, more physical team. And here comes Coach Spurrier with our 4 and 5 wide receiver sets on first and second down. We're throwing the ball vertically down the field. A lot of what is being played in college football and professional football these days were things that we were doing back in the early 90s. And to his credit, what he was drawing up back in his days in the late 80s at Duke. So he's an innovator. He's a character. And I think more importantly, he's a Mount Rushmore of SEC coaches here in this conference.
Hey, Chris, if I come to his restaurant on a Friday or Saturday, if I happen to make it to Gainesville this year, will he be there? Will he greet us?
Oh, he is there a lot. And he's
Is he?
He's going to have the whistle out. He's going to be asking questions. He's going to be he loves trivia. It's fun, man. They have a nice menu there as well. Very eclectic, fresh, like farm to table kind of feel in a lot of ways. So it's awesome, man. And I love what I do with the involvement for the Steve Spurrier First Year Coach of the Year Award, which we've talked about before. It's cool to kind of help cement his legacy as a guy that he didn't care where he was. First year at Duke was a great season there. First year at Florida, 1990, inherits the team and takes them to the SEC championship, which they were on probation. So first in the league that year. And then at South Carolina, actually won the First Year Coach of the Year, obviously before it was in his name, but has always been able to get guys to believe in themselves and to buy into the vision of what he's trying to create.
Yeah, I love the guy. And I saw some pictures on social media. He and Mrs. Spurrier are now getting to travel over in Europe and do things that they've never done before. So I think that's phenomenal. I think he's an amazing person. All right, let's talk about the league right now because obviously, as you mentioned off the top, 9 schools are now in the top 25, came out yesterday. Not a surprise, especially with Texas and Oklahoma now part of it. But certainly the bell cows, Chris, Georgia, Alabama still 1-2 in the conference, don't you think?
It's funny you mentioned that because I was just doing another interview here recently this morning, and I've kind of overlooked Alabama for some degree. Maybe it's the Nick Saban effect of him not being on the sideline anymore. But I think there's, in my mind, 9 teams in this league that can vie for a college football playoff spot. And if you're in, you got a chance to win it all. But when I think about those teams, probably in order, it would be Georgia, then Texas, then Ole Miss, even Missouri, and then probably Alabama.
Wow.
And I can't explain it. I think the position of being an underdog is not one that Alabama fans are used to necessarily being in, but I think it's one they relish. I think they enjoyed that rat poison being yummy back at the SEC title game a couple years ago. I think they enjoyed being doubted after the South Florida close win in Tampa last season and what that team was able to become. But I do think that I'm really excited about watching Alabama football under the leadership of Kalen DeBoer. It was an impossible task. Doug, I don't know that in any sport, college, professional, high school, there's ever been a more difficult coaching vacancy to fill. And they did it as well as they possibly could have. Greg Byrne did a nice job of targeting Kalen DeBoer and going and getting his guy. And I'm excited about how this program is going to continue to win, but maybe with a little different focus on offense and a little more focus on player friendliness than maybe the previous regime did.
Well, I know Coach Saban at the SEC Media Days, and listen, I love Coach Saban because he says what he believes, and he said, listen, offensively, Alabama's going to be stout, even though you got some young receivers, which you know all about, great quarterback, but he feels the secondary on the defensive side is young and inexperienced, and he feels that will be a problem area and cause issues. Maybe Alabama's going to lose some high-scoring games. I mean, when Saban points that out, I think it's an issue.
Yeah, I mean, obviously losing Caleb Downs was disappointing. You do have some youth back there. I'm interested, though, Doug, and you followed this program closer than I have for a long time. I thought at times the defense, particularly what they were doing in the secondary, could have been and should have been simplified a little bit. When you have the best players, which Alabama typically has had, I think sometimes they've gotten too complicated for themselves. I think sometimes you put your best athletes out there, let them feel confident in what they're doing, and go play. So Kane Womack is a guy that I got to know at South Alabama a little bit. I'm excited about how the defense will be led under him and what they'll do with a little different personnel groupings. But I think maybe with the change and specifically because of that youth you talked about, the secondary, maybe they go back to being a little more simple than they had under Coach Saban.
I love that because I think back, and this will lead me to my next question, but Jimmy Johnson, Dennis Erickson, even Larry Coker at Miami when they had that juggernaut going, they let the guys just play.
Yeah.
It was very uncomplicated. Even Bobby Bowden. I mean, his guys just simply played. And so maybe you're right. That's an interesting concept I hadn't thought of, which brings me now, Miami, Florida, the opener. There's a lot of interesting openers, Chris. I mean, Georgia, Clemson, even the first game, FSU, Georgia Tech, and Ireland is going to be a lot of fun. But Miami at Florida, the Canes right now, 2.5-point favorite. I think being the first game, and even Miami now, yeah. I mean, this is a significant game for both schools, I do believe. I'm excited about this game.
Yeah, it's a significant game for both schools. It's a significant game for both coaches, who I think are under a little bit of pressure too. You know this, Doug, with your ties to Florida. I grew up a Florida fan, the son of 2 Florida grads, both from Miami, and that Miami-Florida rivalry was a big time game. It had big players in it, and there was big time disdain for one another. And this game hadn't been played a ton since the late 80s. And it's one of my big regrets as a Florida player. I never got a chance to play against the Hurricanes, but I remember going to those games in the Orange Bowl and experiencing what was a heavyweight match every single year. And I'm not speaking in hyperbole here, Doug. I think this is the most important, most anticipated opener to a Florida season that I can remember in 50 years of being associated with this team in one way or another. Florida's an underdog at home. Florida has 7 home games this year. So this is a season that they've got to be able to win the home games, and they got to be able to win early in the season because we all know how difficult the schedule gets late in the year. there's excitement building in Gainesville, and for those older fans of both Florida and Miami, they're looking forward to reuniting and digging up some of the bad blood from back in the day.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And I've heard you compliment the Florida quarterback, Graham Mertz. I mean, you like him, and I like him too. Does he have enough around him? I mean, he's a good quarterback. As you know, you surround a good quarterback with really good parts. That elevates him, elevates everybody. Is Florida good enough around the quarterback to make it happen?
Yeah, I think they are. I was out of practice about a week and a half ago. Really have upgraded the depth of talent at the receiver position. Ricky Pearsall's gone, but Trey Wilson is back. Trey Wilson is probably the best player on the team. Also got a couple transfers in the offseason. DK, the kid from Wisconsin who played with Graham Mertz back when he was in Madison. And they got another kid from Arizona State they brought in. Khalil Jackson comes back for another year. So really talented there at the receiver position. Running back is another position of talent, although Montrell Johnson had his knee scoped, probably going to miss the Miami game. There's a lot of young guys there that they're excited about. I think the real question, Doug, is the offensive line. The offensive line probably feel good about the first six. They've got to find a way to develop a little bit more depth outside of those six right now, and that's I think could be one of the real defining factors of this season. If Florida's able to exceed the expectations, which Vegas has them, I think, set at 4.5 wins, which is kind of crazy to talk about. But I honestly believe that the team is much better. They've gotten some experience with some young guys playing last year on both sides of the ball. They got some nice transfer portal acquisitions with some experience, and I expect this team to win 7 games this year.
Man, you're getting me fired up, and we're going to let you go here in a minute real quick because I know you're getting picked up for your speaking engagement. Hey, Georgia is a 4.5-point favorite over Alabama right now, that game in Tuscaloosa. I thought, now that's interesting. There haven't been many teams that have rolled into T-Town and they're favorites over Alabama. Understandable, but that's kind of interesting.
It is interesting, and I wonder if that would be the case had we not seen what happened last year with Texas coming to Tuscaloosa. So that was unheard of, to think about somebody coming in there, not only winning that game, but winning by double digits and really dominating both lines of scrimmage. And I think there's a little bit of that lasting memory of how that looked. I also think there's probably a touchdown differential maybe with the Nick Saban factor on the sideline is given with the odds makers, so that may have something to do with it as well. But I go back to Alabama not having a chance to really be underdogs much, but they've been underdogs a couple times against Georgia, and they've done really well in those positions. And I think playing at home as an underdog is going to be a little extra motivating factor for the Tide.
Yeah, it's good. The first month's going to be awesome, and you'll appreciate this story, Chris. I was driving through Gainesville, stopped at Chick-fil-A there on Archer Road, and my wife has this Tom Petty T-shirt on, and obviously Tom Petty, Gainesville guy, into the third quarter. Don't back down, they sing it. She didn't know what, people came up and complimented her T-shirt. I love the shirt. I'm going to wear that shirt. She's like, what are they talking about? Chris, I need to bring her to a game. She needs to experience that. That's cool, isn't it? The end of the third quarter?
So she had no idea that
no.
The tie-in?
No, and it was a cool T-shirt,
yeah.
Like from an old concert that he played in. Oh my goodness. I mean, people just kept coming up to her. She loved it.
Here's the thing. It is a cool tradition, and it's a new tradition.
Yes.
This will be my 10th season with the SEC Network in the SEC Network studios in Charlotte. So I have never actually seen back down in person in the Swamp.
That's unbelievable. Well, see, I haven't been to a game since Tebow's junior year, so I'd like to go back if my schedule with golf and everything works out. So I don't know. Maybe I'll go down. I want to get her picture next to the Danny Werfel statue.
Yeah, there's a.
That's your guy.
He is my guy, and there are a lot of really good home games. This is a tremendous home ticket for season ticket holders this year. So there's a number for you to choose from, man.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Well, Chris, we're going to let you go. Again, it's Chris Doering, and you still giving Peter Burns a hard time, right? You guys are going back and forth?
We always go back and forth, albeit I'm a little bit in the doghouse position after having lost, I think, 6 LSU Florida bets now.
Yeah.
Five football and 1 baseball. So I need to get a little bit of the upper hand there, hoping this year in the Swamp can change my luck.
It's all cyclical, Chris. If you live long enough, and I can attest to that, it's all cyclical. It will come back up. Don't worry.
No doubt. Great.
All right, buddy.
Thanks, man.
Have a great speech tonight.
Thank you, man.